Before we begin, the name of the show is Turn This Off. Frankly, we thought it would be good for marketing and at the same time make us sound kind of cool. Now, having said that, if you're part of the 5% of people wanting the same drab, boring, sleep-inducing content, by all means, yes, turn it off. This is Turn This Off. We're all about the journey, the struggles, and the triumphs. If it's great people doing great things, we're talking to them. It's your ticket to discovering the untold stories, the hidden gems, and the voices that deserve to be heard. Turn off the mundane and turn on the extraordinary. Turn this off. And now your host, Jordan Pauly.
All right, so Sara Barnes, welcome on. Glad to have you.
Awesome. Happy to be here.
You were, as you know, you were my number one. You were in the number one slot when I had this idea to get this started. But you are a very busy person, which is okay. So, and I know you've been busy the last couple weeks here with the Derby. Now, you are in the bourbon industry.
I am. All up in it.
That's great. So give me some insight there in your role, the organization you work for. Just give our audience who maybe aren't watching some context on, what you do in the industry.
Sure. So I work for the Kentucky Distillers Association. We are a trade organization that started back in the 1800s. We do lobbying, governmental affairs, responsibility, sustainability. We are the people who manage and own the intellectual property in the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, which everyone knows about. So part of my job for that association is industry responsibility and sustainability. Any way you can define those words, be it education, research, water, oak, corn, farmers. I also deal with a lot of spent grains troubles. And then if a distillery wants to put a bourbon bottle on a onesie, I'm the person they call because maybe that's not a great life decision. So anything in those realms is really what I handle for the association.
Okay. When you say bourbon bottle on a onesie, are we referring to, can I say it?
Yeah.
Maker's Mark?
Well,
I thought you were talking about like how they send out the holiday things.
Yeah. So they've got like your little outfit for your bottle is fine. But in a responsible world,
yes,
would you want your child to have possibly this drool is bourbon or, bourbon bottle or things of that nature?
Right.
Most of my members are pretty good about it.
Okay, that's good. And I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
No, you're fine. They're all good. I maintain a tight ship. We're good.
Okay, perfect. So you had mentioned environmental, sustainability, all those things. Can you unpack that a bit more? Because, and I was talking with you about this honestly before. When I go to the liquor store, I feel very good about what I'm doing. Number one, like what I'm consuming. But number two, I just look across the shelves and I see a lot of glass. So in my mind, I already think this is, a sustainable industry and glass can be recycled. And I don't necessarily have some of those thoughts when I walk in a liquor store until I decided to have a conversation with you and understood what you do for your role. And I'm like, this is a thing. So maybe walk our audience through why, and we'll speak, I want to go into detail later, but just generally why this is important.
Sure. So obviously as bourbon, we use a ton of different resources, right? Our limestone water in Kentucky is the reason 95% of the bourbon comes out of this state. All bourbon is good. Kentucky bourbon is better. Our white oak, right? I do a lot of plantings. We do a lot of seedlings. We genome map the white oak tree to figure out what, as a resource we are using that we can put back in, grow trees that are, healthier, that actually stay in the forest because we don't just want to take all the trees to make barrels. We also educate farmers, right? I want farmers to know that when they plant corn, they can plant rye as a cover crop. That cover crop can be a crop we use, not just a crop that's there for the small quantity of cover. I work with university for no-till, educating farmers on no-till farming, right? Put back what is in the earth, in the soil, leave it there, and, the next generation will have a better crop. All those things are huge, right? None of those really used to matter to a consumer. They were like, oh my God, this bourbon's great. The label's really pretty. Price point's on. Awesome. Or I go to this distillery. It's an amazing experience. And now I have a personal connection with it. Now the consumer's smarter. The consumer wants to know where that glass goes when they're done with it. They want to make sure it's a recyclable product. They want to know what they're paying for, right? Is it non-GMO? Is it GMO? Is it, certified Kentucky Proud? Are they sourcing it from out of state? Is there a story and a lore and a history? And then also what the company as a mass global corporation is doing to back all that up. Are they conserving less water? Are they using an RO system? Are they being good stewards when part of the packaging maybe can't be recycled? For example, Maker's Mark. They are a B Corp certified distillery, one of the first to ever do it because it is super hard. As a distillery, think about how much waste we have, right? There's not a lot that gets to be reused. So for them being B Corp certified, they also have figured out how to recycle and crush their glass on campus. So you get a pallet of glass. There's a large percentage of that that's not usable.
Really?
Before it just got thrown away, right? Or sent back. Now,
so how does that work? How is glass not usable? Does it, I'm going to be super ignorant here, but
no.
That's what this is for.
Yeah.
The bottles, do they come to makers? Do most people, the bottles come in from obviously maybe another manufacturer? Is that correct?
Sure. So sometimes they come from overseas. Sometimes it's a local place that makes them. Obviously, a bottle like a Maker's or a Willet Pot Still, right? Those are custom bottles.
Right.
So different specs for the weight of the glass. If where the closure goes on was actually like poured correctly. So does all your closures fit? Sometimes there's just a one-off, right? You may get a shirt kind of like a TJ Maxx, right? Some of those bottles are meant for TJ Maxx. Some are meant for Abercrombie. It's going to be a little bit different. So there is a percentage that when they crank out 6,000 bottles, there's going to be a couple that aren't perfect or don't pass specs or weigh a little bit different because you have to figure you got a 6-pack or a 12-pack case. You are paying for the shipment, the delivery, the whatever on what the weight of that should be once those bottles are full. If the glass is a little bit off, you can kind of work with that, but you've got to think about things like that. So in one member, which we have over 64 distilling members, I think, across the state, operating multiple locations, one member having, say, 10 bottles a day that aren't right. What are you doing with those bottles? So Makers has started they crush them on facility and grind them. You can literally pick it up, hold it with your hand.
Like
it does not cut you. It doesn't, and it's all the edges are straight. And they're starting to do all of their paths for walking out in Loretto.
That's cool.
So then they kind of epoxy it down. It's something that they can use. Some of it has little labels still on it. Some has some wax on it. And it is fully sustainable to have there. That's one small thing that somebody had an idea and thought, how can we do this? They're out in the middle of nowhere. Recycling is not always an option. They have things set up where they can do recycling on campus. They have the employees that work there. They get to bring their recycling in. Some of the people in the town get to bring theirs back. So having a member like that thinks outside of the box, thinks about the future of what needs to be done or can be done, has really set up some of my craft members who are smaller and may not have corporate budgets to think about when they build something, thinking about it sustainably as opposed to building it and fixing it later. So
I love that. And maybe this Maker's example, they're actually having the community bring stuff into. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Because when I think about sustainability and through this lens, when I think about a single-use water bottle, now I won't pretend to be perfect. We have 4 kids, so like we do
you
that.
have a few of them, yeah.
Right. But we have made it a point, and I remember when we lived in California, we went to a Costco there, and you would think more conscious people, at least my assumptions would be, and just remember seeing people have cases and cases of like water going out of Costco, right? Somebody's cart filled with like 3 cases. I don't know what they were doing with it. Maybe they're filling up a food truck or going somewhere, but I just thought that's one person in one Costco at one point in time when I thought about all the plastic. Because for me, like I have a fairly hard stance on that. Again, we do it, so I'm a hypocrite in saying it. But that's when I think about sustainability, because I really went down a road of looking at that one time. And a lot of that plastic isn't recycled. A lot of that plastic goes other places, right? I won't pretend to know. I haven't followed the trail,
Sure.
but I've read enough to where it's like, it goes other places. Maybe it goes to China. Maybe it goes somewhere else. It ends up in the ocean, all these things. So the fact that a brand or company like Maker's Mark is allowing people to potentially
Have
funnel
access,
stuff there,
yeah.
right? Like have access to do that. And then you as somebody in the community knowing exactly where that's going, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So small wins across the state, right? If you don't give access and education to people, they won't do it. I mean, I am the same way about plastic bottles, but I have them.
Mhm.
I use them. I understand it. Our office, for example, we have an office in Frankfurt. It's an old Victorian house. We have like a purified water because it's Frankfurt water. So we got a little purifier. But we still, when guests come, they don't want a glass out of our cupboard and me to bring them a thing. We have bottled water there.
Yes.
And like things like that just, it's such a habit. Now we recycle those bottles, but do they go where they're supposed to be? Does it have to be sorted? Do people ask those questions in their community, or do you just have a bin, throw everything in and assume it goes where it's supposed to be?
Yes. I think that's
most people.
Yeah. Me being naive, I'm like, oh, we have a recycling can. This is going to a good place.
Yeah. It's all full this week. That's awesome. Like, look at me.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the consumer's getting smarter, the consumer's asking those questions, going down those rabbit holes. So that causes brands and companies to have to answer or have the readily available information, right? You scan something on a bottle and you learn about what they're doing for a white oak initiative or water conservation. I think that's huge because I think the fact that the consumer doesn't have to hound and ask about it, it's out in front of everyone and they're saying the statement of, we're doing this to just be better stewards. That's a hard thing, especially in our industry, because there's so much heritage and history. So one small change in a distillery makes a family that has owned that for years really nervous about what it does to the recipe, right? What if we change our RO system? Well, is that going to change the mash bill? Is that going to change the way it ferments? Is that going to change how it tastes at the end? So
when you say RO, I'm gonna ask.
Reverse osmosis.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You can put that at the bottom. You can tell I just talk about it and act like everyone knows.
I'm like, I don't know. And I'm assuming somebody's listening. I'm like, maybe they don't know. So that's why clarifying.
Okay. Yeah. So thinking about how to keep the heritage, keep the brand, keep what they're used to doing, right? Because some of them, as they expand and get bigger, they just replicate what they know works instead of making the machines bigger, which is awesome because you know this whole conglomeration works. So you just copy and paste it over here because you have enough space and you're just running doubles as opposed to building an entire new pot still, an entire new column, and then doubling the recipe in one vat, right? So getting them to understand like, A, we want to leave things better than we found them. B, we're not changing recipes. We're not changing the way you do things. We're just thinking about where the end user goes as opposed to just thinking about it aging and going in a bottle and someone enjoying it. So there's just a little bit that I've had to kind of, you know, a lot of my brands, like I said, are really good at it, but there's a few that I have to be like, just think about something other than just putting the barrel away and waiting, you know, forecast other things, be it the people, like sustainability of workforce is huge. Nobody thinks about it like that. Like, well, half the people at a distillery have worked there forever. When they're all at retirement age, what are we doing?
Right.
Like, who's
I didn't think about that
backfilling?
until you just mentioned that.
Yeah. So that's also a part of it, right? We worked with the Kentucky Chamber and did a talent pipeline management project. Everyone needs maintenance technicians. You know, everyone in the state thinks, well, I only work at a distillery if I know how to distill. Oh my gosh, if you're an accountant, a lawyer, you do marketing, like please apply at a distillery. Because those are the positions that maybe somebody didn't go to school for. I have a hospitality degree and I'm a registered veterinary technician. Hi, guess what I do?
You're doing it all.
So it wasn't the route that I thought I was going to do, but the skills that I had made sense. And then my passion and drive for what I wanted to know and what I wanted to learn from members. I started a craft distillery and I was like, I kind of like this. I kind of understand it. I think that I could apply here, here, and here for different things. And that's really how I fell into it. But
we'll go down this road now.
Yeah.
The first distillery you worked for, that was the one out in Union, is that correct?
Yep. So technically on the Boone County Independence-ish line.
Yes.
Boone County Distilling.
Oh, right. We can't call it Union then. We have to call it Boone County.
I know.
Yeah.
So technically Boone County Distilling. Over off Tobin Drive. I was there about 4 years. I did everything but distill. And I think if I would have learned how to do that, I would have had to do that too. But I got a lot of knowledge from it. I went in not really knowing a lot. I was like, I like brown liquor occasionally, but
that was like, it was a new distillery within the past.
They had been, I guess, open a couple years. They had sourced product. Had started putting their barrels away about a year and a half before I started. Had just gotten a product to market, trying to figure out, visitors experience. How do we do tours? Can we get on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail? Can we have a big brown sign on the side of the interstate so everyone knows we're back here in an industrial park? And I was brought on to kind of help with some of that marketing, some of the sales of the product. We had an amazing MGP juice that was between 10 and 12 years old. Made my job really easy because it was really easy to sell. So it was 1833 back then. But now they've got their own product that rested in a barrel. So they've got Boone County bourbon. They've got a wheated bourbon. They have a rum, bourbon cream, which everyone loves.
I think I remember, and I don't remember if we were away at the time when that launched or when that became a thing. I think we might have been.
I think you were already gone.
We were already not here. But it was cool coming back and seeing that. The same with, like New Riff. When it's in your own backyard, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. And they had a story. Boone County built their story made by ghosts on a distillery that was around in the 1800s. We found cool old journals, old papers. So much information. And then Keith Neltner was one of the original kind of designers on it. And he made it into our story and our logo. That's an amazing thing to be able to do because everybody's like, oh my God, now I can read about it and Google it and find out more history. We used to have people that would come in and be like, did you know this about this person? And I'm like, did you really you just went down a straight rabbit hole and I'm here for it. Just little stories and people on labels. So having that sitting right in front of FedEx in an industrial park is not normal, right? You want to be Woodford and Versailles with wild horses or, American Pharoah in the front.
The landscape and the deep history.
But you walk in the doors and you forget about that because we had so much rich history. We love to tell a story. And then people absolutely love that we were honest about what we were making or what we were sourcing and like the vision of what we were doing. So I think that helped me like solidify, like, this is probably where I should be. I grew up in South Carolina, but like I'm full into horses and bourbon. Like Kentucky is home. Let's go.
That's great.
So
maybe a interesting subject to go down. And do you feel that the bourbon industry is a male dominant industry? And to follow up with that, like how do you feel in that space? We'll start with like your early experience, right? The first 4 years at Boone County, and then how you feel now. I'm interested in that perspective, and I asked that number one because I think it's interesting, but number two, I worked at Toyota for 5 years, and it was a very male dominant industry, and as a male and somebody who doesn't think about it, as like a white privileged male who doesn't think about it. I wouldn't say privileged, but I will admit that there's some privileges that just come with those things. I'm just curious your perspective, right? Because a lot of times I don't think about other people's perspective or like, what was it like for you? Because I don't feel like I face some of those same.
Sure. I think we all have a little bit of that in some quadrant, right? So for me, when I talk about the industry, the first thing you'll hear me say is, I don't look like everybody else because it is old white dudes, 100%. That is the heritage, the history, the family. None of my last name is anything like any brand. When I was at Boone County, there were myself and another female kind of ran things, right? We were manager, assistant manager, overseer, marketing, things of that nature. Most brands are owned by males. The men I worked for were wonderful at what they did. But I think that feminine touch of things, right? We think about things a little bit further past like, oh, this is a really good idea. Let's do it. And here it is. It's just
a male instinct.
How we run a household.
Like, shoot first, ask questions later.
We'll figure it out. And I'm like, figure it out. Like, how many barrels do we have? Like, what if it takes off? So figuring out where I fit in that and where my voice fit was a hard thing, right? When I first started, I was a veterinary technician who ran some country clubs and was really good at hospitality. Do I have a seat at the table to say like that label maybe won't land with a lot of people? Or maybe that font's not a good choice. Or if we market it and don't just have men in our advertisements, maybe a woman will pour something other than bourbon cream. I didn't know where I fit with those opinions. So they were very open to having all of us have a discussion about it. Some opinions went one way, some went others. Sometimes, I won, other times I didn't. At the end of the day, I built the relationships with the people that bought into the product, right? That was the soft touch of me being at a Kroger doing a tasting on a Friday night when I probably had better things to do, but I wanted you to experience bourbon, even if you tell me it's going to be too hot and you don't like it, and me walk you through how to love it. And then I built those relationships. So I got a little more confident in like maybe there is a female touch in here, right?
Yeah. So you just hit on it. And I'm going to ask for people who don't like bourbon. I mean, I like bourbon. You like bourbon.
Makes it easy.
The whole thing, right? So it's easy for this conversation. But if somebody's trying bourbon for the first time, or if they have an apprehension to it, I don't know. Like for me, I don't like clears. I don't do gin. I don't do vodka. I'll do tequila if I'm feeling wild. I don't know if I consider that a clear. I'm not sure.
Depends upon,
Right.
A little cloudy sometimes.
Right. So for somebody who's maybe listening or apprehensive to try it or has tried it and like, not for me, what are some tips and tricks for how to potentially like it, right? If you're cutting it with water or letting it sit.
Forget what you did in college.
Yeah.
It's first rule. I
shots of
drink,
benchmark in Kentucky Tavern.
I have some friends that like you have a peach on the table and they like go back straight to peach schnapps in college days, right? We all have our story or our feeling about something. For me, not everyone's going to drink it the same. Everyone thinks it has to be neat, no rocks, no nothing, right? I change based on my mood what I want to do with it. Is it going to be awesome in a cocktail? Am I going to drink it with one rock and just pretty much have my nose in it and maybe not sip it for 5 hours? I don't know. So my biggest thing is don't go in with a preconceived idea of what it's going to be like, right? Start with your nose. Go easy. Leave your mouth open, which feels really uncomfortable because you're open mouth breathing. Right. But
and then you get the fumes with it too, right? Because when you're at a tasting, they walk you through some of this.
Yeah. And just be in it for a minute, right? Think about what you're associating. I had some woman be like, banana bread. I'm like, yes, that sounds lovely. Like, I want that. Let me get in there.
Yeah.
Some people it's cherries. Some people it's wood. Some people are like, it smells like feet. Like, well, if that's what you smell, like, let's add a little water. Let's open something else up. I think people think it has to be super complicated or really eloquent when they're like, it smells like stone fruit and maybe the mist off of a shoreline. Like, no, it's whatever you get from it. And then that experience and that warmth. Biggest mistake is everybody picks it up and wants to take a big old champion gulp. Don't do it. Why? Why scald your palate?
It might have been a rough day. You don't know, right?
Put it in there. Kentucky chew. Little hug. Just chew it around, swirl it, get your mouth used to what's happening. That first sip is not going to be what you're going to experience the rest of the time. And then when you swallow, I always tell people, breathe out like a dragon. And they laugh at me and I'm like, that's the only way you're going to do it. You are going to open your mouth and huff if I tell you dragon, as opposed to just like blow out. They're going to be like,
right.
Like, no, I want you to like full mouth, just right on out. So that will get you kind of like started, right? The second sip, now your mouth isn't like, oh my gosh, there's 110 proof alcohol in my mouth. Your mouth's like, ooh, maybe a little caramel, maybe a little cherry. I don't know, wood, smoke. When you swallow it, you don't have to breathe out because your body is now used to it. And that's when you get something on the back end, something on the front. You figure out the finish. It's such an approachable, easy thing. And if it's too hot, just a little bit of water. Nobody's mad about it.
Now, is this distilled water?
Well, I mean, you could get like limestone water if you'd like.
Right. We've been to some bourbon tastings, and I just remember being there. This was over at Greg's house, my brother-in-law, and there were people who had tinctures of distilled water, and they'd drop them in. And like it didn't make sense to me at the time. I was like, "Wow, this is you're being a little extra here."
Yeah, I'm just gonna run it over the faucet.
Yeah, let's just shoot this thing and move on. And try the next thing. Yeah. But the more I started to understand about it, that does change. And you mentioned
you're proofing it down on your
open up different flavors, things, experiences.
Yeah. So you just don't be afraid of it. And it's not for everyone. And that's totally fine. But I think so many people have I'm going to get a shot of Jack and shoot it on down. Like that's not, it is meant to be enjoyed. It is meant to be shared. It is meant to be talked about, right? It is something that as a signature spirit in Kentucky, we're super proud of. I mean, that is all we want to talk about, right? We have our stamp on it. It comes from here. We are proud of it. So we want you to have a good experience. I don't want you shooting Willet pot still at a bar. I mean, yeah.
It's too expensive to do that.
I want you to get like a bougie, whiskey sour with egg white and some walnut bitters and new riff in it. Like, make it something that you enjoy and make it approachable.
Get an orange peel or lemon peel and watch the bartender like burn it or do something and like.
Part of it's the show, right?
It is the show.
Yeah. I'll pay $18 for a cocktail if I get to watch you make it.
Right.
100%.
It didn't used to be like that.
No.
But it has definitely become a craft now.
Yeah.
favorite. I don't know if you can say this. I don't know if we can go here.
Are you going to favorite bourbon me?
Yeah. And give me just like one on the top 3. And if you can't, because it's going to get you in trouble, that's fine. But for you, not about the companies that you work with, but say having worked in the industry, is there, and maybe you didn't know about this bourbon before the industry, so maybe.
So younger days, we referred to them as brown liquor drinks because we talked about the college stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generally, that was like a Beam and Coke, standard issue.
Yeah.
Not really sure I liked it. I think it was just what I drank, and it kind of made it taste like cherry Coke a little bit in my mind.
I feel like that's a great starting bourbon. Just to like add on to that, I did the same thing in college. It was Beam and Sprite. You could get like a 175.
Your sister still does that.
Yeah, does she?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's still your sister's choice.
With some olives. Don't forget the olives.
That's right. Yeah. So for me, I get asked this question all the time. I go with whatever the last thing I drank was or what I feel like this week, right? So I am very drawn to ryes. I did not used to like them at all. Now I think they are wonderful. I think they're wonderful by themselves. I think they're amazing in cocktails. They bring it to a whole nother level. Michter's rye is one of my favorites. It's reliable. It's good.
Is that the green label?
Yep.
Yeah. I know labels and branding.
Point.
I'm like, yes, that's the one.
Heaven Hill makes some really great ryes. Their Pikesville rye, I think, is super underrated, especially for the price point. It makes a killer cocktail. Rittenhouse rye is another one that's really good.
I didn't really start liking ryes, I'd say, until the last 2 years, but I had to approach it through a Manhattan because I feel like rye, you can do anything in a Manhattan, but something about a Manhattan with rye, I think Bullet Rye is like my go-to right now for Manhattan. And again, if I had Bullet on its own, I would tell you that, and these probably aren't I'm probably not saying the right thing, but I tell you that it's hot or it's spicy or it burns.
Yeah, kicks you in the teeth a little bit.
Correct. But it made it more approachable through a Manhattan, and now I'm starting to like delve into that space more. But the problem is that like now I'm opening myself up to a whole new world.
You are.
Where I go into a liquor store and I know the creature comforts, right?
Yeah.
I'm just looking for a blend, a
nice
bourbon, a single barrel. Yeah, a
bourbon.
Weeded bourbon. And now it's like rye. I don't even know. It's like
You got a whole nother shelf to open up now.
Correct. Which is a problem because that's more money.
I get it. Well, I think about that every time a brand comes out with a new product. I'm like, I really should have that on my bar, probably.
Yeah.
So for me, ryes, I don't know. I didn't like the burn when I first had them. Then as I approached it, like you did, in a cocktail, and it made it just a little bit different. It didn't make it so sweet, right? Because if you're getting a rye, most of them are like a 90 rye, 95% rye, and then like a 5% malted rye. Well, that's a lot. Think about if you had 95% of like seeds in your rye bread. It's a lot to handle. The few like 10 is like, ooh, this is kind of nice. So I think about it like that, right? I think straight to like the grain, what it would taste like. Whereas if we're doing a bourbon, we may have 21% rye, which still seems high, but you're cutting that with 70% corn. That is just making it sweet, like a pancake batter. So I think about it from that standpoint. So I like my ryes when it's not in a super sweet cocktail, because then it's going to be like a fight in my mouth. Like, is it going to be bitter? Is it going to be super hot? Is it going to finish well? But yeah, I think they're creative. I usually have my ryes with ice, at least 1 cube.
Okay.
Just tones it down a little bit.
I'll have to try it.
Yeah.
You mentioned new bourbons coming out before. I didn't have this as a question, so this one just naturally came to mind. What do we think about, let's say we collectively, we're going to take a stance on this. So Travelers came out, Buffalo Trace Travelers, which is, I have 2 bottles. I actually haven't opened it because I've been afraid that I won't be able to find more, that scarcity thing that you run into
Kentucky's
with Buffalo Trace.
done a really good job of that.
Yes, it's like people just take them off the shelves and the resale value, all the things. So I have 2 bottles. I haven't opened or tried it yet. Obviously, the allure is because it's coming from Buffalo Trace.
Sure.
What do we think about artists and influencers? And I guess I don't have a stance on this. I'm curious if you do or not. Getting into that space, right? When you think about like Ryan Reynolds and gin, yes,
he's
not him as a person.
Yeah.
But I think I want your take on it.
Okay. So I have a lot of opinions on this. Right. So think about back in the day. Do you remember when Mila Kunis was with Wild Turkey?
I do.
Right?
Yeah.
Smoking hot. She's in a commercial, standing in the Rick House, drinking some bourbon. Way to like put a woman out there and make it really kind of fun.
Yes. It's like Marlboro, just like women in
Yeah.
cowboy outfits
Yeah,
smoking
not just
cigarettes on a horse or
cowboys.
something.
Yeah, it's cowgirls too, right?
That's
So
true.
then it became Matthew McConaughey. And then there was like Long Branch, right? So like that's his brand. His brand? Is it his brand? Like he likes it. He blended it. He knew what he was doing. Or was it a Russell family kind of collaboration, right? Things that maybe as a consumer you don't always know. Ryan Reynolds has done a wonderful job. Aviation Gin. Would anyone have cared about it if Deadpool had not talked about it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Probably not.
His lovely wife does like Buzzball or whatever they're Betty Buzz, whatever they're called, right? I know her. I don't know the brand name. She does like pre-mixed cocktails and mixers and stuff, right? Now you've paid attention to that because you have an vested interest in her. So marketing wise, it's super smart. I don't know a person on the planet who doesn't love Chris Stapleton.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, you don't have to like country music to just love Chris Stapleton, right? So that was a very smart business move for them. And if he had something to do with it, as in blending or picking it out, or he tasted a barrel and was like, this is it. That's awesome, right? Plus, that's one part of people that maybe would not be into whiskey or into bourbon that are into music, right? I think about Blackened. Do you know the story of Blackened?
No.
The barrels listen to Metallica.
Really?
Yeah, that is how they're put to sleep. Like they just listen to heavy metal. That is their shtick.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was like Jefferson's Ocean or something.
Yeah,
like
right. You have the salt on your lips once you have,
Yeah.
Sharks were tagged. I don't know, whatever it is. Pirates. So each brand is doing a really good job of telling a story, having someone think outside of the box, because someone who maybe really loves heavy metal would not have bought a bourbon, or maybe they would. But now they're like, ooh, they've made it so that I like something about that. So now I want to buy it. I want to try it. And then I want to try others. And then I want to think about the story behind others. I want to think about how it's made. I want to ask the questions. I think marketing wise, it's brilliant. Boone County just had a product release, Gentleman's Cut. Steph Curry, basketball player.
Oh, really? That's pretty cool.
Super cool.
Yeah. No, so I asked that question because from a marketing perspective, I get it. And I'm like, that's amazing. The part of me that was like born and raised here and really,
that's not Kentucky.
Yeah. And so I appreciate your perspective because it's almost like I don't want these brands to be taken advantage of. And I don't know why I feel like I need to stick up for them. They don't. I want the Chris Stapletons and the people of the world to actually appreciate and like bourbon versus, and I don't know if they do or don't. So I shouldn't jump to the generalizations that I am versus just like, oh, here's a brand deal with an alcohol company.
I signed these Nike shoes. Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't know the stories or the situations for any of these people who are getting involved.
Sure.
But there's the asshole side of me that's just thinking, oh, it's just for the money. Or like, they're just doing it so, Buffalo Trace is just doing it so they can sell another bottle. But your perspective of, oh, maybe that brings somebody in the front door who wouldn't have otherwise. That's a fresh
route,
perspective, right?
It's a quiet, easy, something that's in common and something that's comfortable. Now, I will talk about the irony of Chris Stapleton did not do a Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah, that's
it just feels a little off brand, but
true. You think he would have gone just like Jack Daniels, just straight for the big one?
Just straight Tennessee whiskey.
Yeah.
Side note, if he's listening, maybe just some feedback. I mean, I love that it's Kentucky bourbon. I'll take it.
Thank you.
Of any kind.
Thank you.
But like just feels like maybe there was a song.
Yes, there was. That I didn't even.
I was waiting.
Put it together there.
I could see it was not hitting, and I was like, jokes are funnier when you.
Too much going on here. It's like the lighting, the sound, everything that I can't sometimes.
We haven't seen each other for a while. So for those who don't know, we know each other. We have like familiar connections. I am his sister's best friend. So
yes, that is, and we didn't even get to that point in the beginning of.
I know.
That's
why I was supposed to be the first guest, but he wanted to do it during Derby season.
Yes, which Sarah was heavily involved in. So it's not even
stuff. Just the stuff.
But it's good because I think I've worked some of the kinks out. So like I would say the lighting is probably better on you, where on others there might have been like some like raccoon eyes or some shadowing.
Hopefully I look great.
Yeah, I think some things have come together that will pay off for you and for me. So for people who are listening and don't know bourbon, give me it has to be what makes it a bourbon. And the reason, yes, the reason I asked that is because I've got a buddy in Austin. He loves Jack Daniels, and he'll call it bourbon.
And it crushes a part of your soul.
Like it does. A part of me dies inside each time he says it, and he'll do it on purpose now to just troll me. And he'll always, I don't know, he'll give me. We go back and forth, but I explained to him why it's not. It's a whiskey and not a bourbon. But for those listening,
okay,
like we can set the record straight.
We're gonna drop it. We're gonna go education. Okay.
Yes.
So a bourbon, to be a bourbon, has to be in a new charred oak container. Doesn't necessarily have to be a barrel. Cooperages just make really good barrels. Barrels work a little bit better. I'm sure if you got really creative and wanted to make a white oak box, you could do that too. Just too many corners for leakage, but go for it. So new charred white oak container. It has to be at least 51% corn. So the majority grain has to be corn, right? What you play with outside of that, be it a rye, a malted barley, a malted wheat, just wheat in general, depends upon what your recipe is. So for bourbon, 51%. Majority of people are in the 60s and 70s for the corn portion. It's a high part of what bourbon is. It also has to be distilled at a certain temperature, right? So we're not proofing vodka. We're not jumping to the 180 proof. You're not making that clear spirit super high. And then some of the things like bottled in bond, right? Straight Kentucky bourbon, like all the different labels and things are based on how long it's been in that barrel. So if you want a straight, it's got to be at least 2 years. A lot of places wait till 4. Tastes a little bit better, but that's 4 years of paying taxes on a barrel. So you kind of judge what you're losing, what you're doing, what you're not, right? You judge what's best for market, right? A lot of newer brands, a lot of craft guys, they're really creative. That's awesome. Do you want to do a product right out of the gate? Do you want to play with a little gin and get kind of fun with botanicals because it's cheap and easy, right? Gray neutral spirit, jazz it up a bit, put it in a bottle, you have something to sell. I think that's why a lot of people source. We've talked about MGP. They make great juice. They've made it forever in Indiana. They know what they're doing. A lot of people buy barrels from them, source it, blend it, make it their own. So that level of education and like what your friend's talking about with Jack Daniels, like Jack makes bourbon until Jack decides he likes charcoal.
Right.
And he filters that puppy and runs it through. And now he's added something to it.
Double filtration through charcoal, I think, or something.
So once you've added anything that has a flavor, a color, a compound, a something to bourbon, you've lost it. That's it. So he makes bourbon, does the work, and then decides like, should be a little different.
Right. Okay. That's
so for your friend in Austin, it's a whiskey.
If you're listening,
it's not a bourbon.
So if you think about Jim Beam then, and this was a big, and I just don't, it's not just them. There's Evan Williams and others that come to mind when you make and this was a big thing, I would say, maybe I could be wrong on timing, like 5 or 6 years ago, the honey infused, the fireball-esque, right? Cinnamon infused. When you think about those.
Peach bourbon, peach whiskey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jim Beam makes bourbon, but as soon as they do that, it then becomes a whiskey. Do they have to label it as such, or like how does that work?
So yeah, TTB is who controls that, right? They do the labeling, they set up the standards for what it is, and then the ABC also controls things like that. So Alcohol and Beverage Commission. So there are standards so that people don't label something a malt whiskey or a bourbon or a Kentucky straight. They're really good about it, but there are things that kind of like sneak through, right? Like there was a straight bourbon that was made in like India or something. We were all like, gotta be made in the United States.
Yeah.
We say Kentucky because it's how we are. I mean, I say we. I've been here 10 years, but I feel like you're straight up in it.
I mean, you're in the
like transplant for pretty good.
In like one of the founding industries for the state. Yeah. So I'd say that you're probably more in than I am.
Right. So a lot of people go, oh, well, it has to be made in Kentucky. And I'm like, I love you for saying that. 100%. That's exactly how I feel. It doesn't. It just has to be made in the United States.
But 95% of it, you said it before, like close to 95 comes out of here. And is that more near Bardstown?
So Amber Triangle, right? Lexington, Louisville, Bardstown. That's where the big big guys are. That's where the biggest quantity are. But we have craft guys spreading across the entire state. So every little bit of Kentucky and the Commonwealth has someone that has bourbon coming out of it.
Okay. We went over the what makes a bourbon. So then when we talk about it goes into a barrel, we can get into the sustainability piece because that is interesting to me from the very limited research that I've done. And again, never thought about this before this conversation. But leading up to this conversation, I'm like, oh, I guess this is kind of a big deal. Because when I think about trees and white oak, and you can correct me on the very, again, limited research that I did, but I read something like 1 million trees, a number every year are used for these barrels, right? Because it needs to be a new white oak barrel. So 1 million trees, that's a lot. Never thought about that before. But then, like, what's the restoration process, or like, how is the industry thinking about it? Is it a 1-for-1? Because I know
you take one, you put one back.
Right? Yeah. 1-for-1. We'll plant a tree.
Yeah. Or is it Fern Gully, the movie that like our age group knows, where we're like deforesting all of the earth?
It's tragic, and it was such a scary movie.
I have loved trees since a small age because I thought they cried like black goo and they seeped and I felt bad. Yeah.
And these machines had, like, if I recall, had emotions and were very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's your reference to Almost 40, guys. You're welcome.
I was there too. So when you think about white oak too, as a species, from, again, my very limited understanding, I won't pretend to know. I know what a tree is. I know what trees are, but white oak takes a while to grow, right? So tell me how this works in the industry. Is everybody looking at this? You're looking at it in partnership with, different distilleries. How are you putting back in what you're taking out?
Sure. So a lot of distilleries, so multiple fold. We'll start with partners, right? Cooperages that are good stewards as being loggers, right? So a cooperage is the place that makes the barrels. And if you ever get the chance to go to a cooperage and take a tour, do it. It's the most dangerous job you'll ever see someone do, but be also the coolest.
Where is this? Is there?
So Kelvin Cooperage is one that's in the state. We also have Independent Stave Company. So those are two predominant that are used. There's tons of cooperages across the state. Those are predominant. Like Brown-Forman has their own cooperage as like a distillery whole. So these are the guys that go out, they buy trees, they have logging companies, they log their own farms, right? They know exactly what they need to make these barrels for us, because after we're done with them, we don't get to use them again, right? They get shipped to a Rhinegeist for him to finish a beer in, or they get shipped to Scotland, and that's where your scotch comes from, right? So these barrels have a lot to give over the years, but bourbon, we get them one. We get one shot. As soon as something's dumped out of it, we don't get to use it again. So we have really great partners that have educated loggers. They've educated the forest industry. University of Kentucky has an ag school. They do an amazing job with forest
great
partners.
program, I think. A good ag program.
Amazing. So figuring out, how to educate, right? Because you can't just go and start whacking down trees because they're may not be right. They may be used for other purposes, or the last thing you want to do is take a tree and it not be right for a barrel stave. So these cooperages, these loggers work together, right? They find exactly what is perfect. They also have not like taken a tree and planted a tree, right? A lot of our members do like Angel's Envy. I can't remember what it's called. Toast to Trees, I think is what it's called. They do it a couple of times a year. They go out and plant, but they plant from the standpoint of, it may not be a white oak they're planting, but they're planting something for forest coverage, right? Because you don't want sad little trees in a forest. You want big, massive, canopied trees. Those are not the ones we're going to go and cut down, right? These are the trees that are going to provide the oxygen, that are going to home the birds, that are going to provide the coverage for the animals on the ground. Like, those are the big guys. So part of what we do is studying what makes that really good tree. So I'll straight nerd on you for a minute, right?
Let's go.
University of Kentucky has done a genome mapping of a white oak. There is a mother tree out at Maker's Mark campus. And this is like one of those moments when you drive out, you get to go see this tree and like angels sing when you see it. You're like, because it's the most beautiful tree I've ever seen in my adult life. Like
at Maker's.
It is huge and gorgeous, and canopies and things below it know exactly where they should be, what they should do. It has provided so much for this forest. So to be able to study that and figure out, okay, if this mapping of this tree is most perfect for what we need for the forest, the land, the coverage, how do we figure out how to make trees less wimpy, right? Like, for lack of a better word. I don't want little twigs with a few branches that maybe drop a few acorns. I want really good ones. So figuring out what that genome pattern looks like, and can we take like a tree from Wisconsin and plant it in Kentucky, and will it thrive? Can we take a different tree or acorn from Kentucky, plant it in Wisconsin, right? North Carolina, different places. Makers has a large property, so they've done a lot with sustainable practices that we mentioned before. They also have a plot that University of Kentucky runs with Dr. Laura DeWald, super cool human. We went out there a couple months ago because she needed to measure 5,000 saplings. It was that really beautiful day in March, and I was like, oh my God, it's going to be sunny and wonderful. 5,000 saplings is a whole lot, by the way, to measure their growth, check their little tag.
And she did all 5,000.
So I sent an email out to membership, and I was like, who wants to spend a Monday out in the field and not at your office? Like, who wants to do this? So I had about 40 volunteers come from different brands, different places, and we spent the entire day measuring for her. She looked at us and she was like, myself and some grad students, this would have taken us like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we, like, all but 800 of them, I think, got measured. And for me, like, doing that and learning about where each one of these little saplings came from, why they're out here being test plotted, right? Makers giving this land to be able to do that, like, all of that's huge. Now we can figure out, okay, this plot from Texas may not be ideal here, but we've learned something from it to put it somewhere else, or take those acorns and crossbreed them to make a better tree. So things like that, the research and education are huge. And then the consumer, right? It's always doom on the news. So it's like, white oak sustainability, we're running out of barrels. And I'm like, settle down.
Well, that's where I was going to go next is...
There's plenty of trees.
Okay. Like, what's the outlook? Are you guys mapping out 10, 15 years of what you consume versus what's coming back in?
Yeah. I mean, as a bourbon industry, you know what we're really good at? Forecasting and aging, right? It's what we may not be really awesome at a lot of other things, but like, we know when something sits and it has to wait and be better. Right. So we do the same thing with our partners. University of Kentucky does an awesome job. They're trying to figure out what plots need to be planted, where we need to find different trees, what trees should be cut, as opposed to just cutting them and figuring out what they're better for at the moment. So I lean on my partners at Independent Save, Kelvin Cooperage, some of those big cooperages that own logging companies or partner with them. They do an amazing job. And then back setting that to like research at a university, like, we've got all the tools to be better stewards about it. And I mean, yes, a tree is going to be used for a barrel, but the rest of that tree is used for 5 or 6 other things, you know, some of them 50 other things. It's not like you just get what you get and the rest is kind of trashed.
Sure.
So I think the education for a consumer, that's why I said, like, look up Independent Stave Company, see what they do for the earth and trees. And it's insane. It's absolutely amazing.
So we were talking about trees and sustainability, but now I want to talk about water.
Yeah.
Is one of the things, of course, you read things online, and then there's that, and then there's reality. It's like limestone water. Does bourbon need to use limestone water for it to be considered a bourbon?
No. It just makes it better.
Okay. Well, there's what is it? Widow Jane. I think they're distilled in New York, if I remember correctly. And great marketing, in my opinion. They have on their bottle that they use limestone water. I'm not sure if there's limestone in New York exactly where or if they're importing their water or what.
Ship it in, yeah.
But I remember looking on the shelf and I see this and it's from New York. I'd never tried it before. This was years ago. And I looked at it and said limestone water. I'm like, these guys are lying. Like, that's not real. This is just marketing.
There's a percentage you can lie on your bottle, probably.
Yeah,
story.
There's got to be something. Maybe it's a drop from a tincture bottle and I don't know what it is. So it doesn't need to have limestone water.
It's not a standard. Yeah, it's not a law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we going to run out of limestone water? So I know, just hear me out here.
All right.
And the water that's pulled for these distilleries, are they near creeks? Are they near water sources?
Both, and yes, and some. How's that for an answer?
That's great. That's super clear.
So I have a thought about Widow Jane. As soon as you said New York, I was like, would the branding have been like using the same water as really good New York style pizza? I feel like that would have been
Right.
slightly better. Because
If you're listening,
totally different. Yeah, maybe feedback on that. Or just send me a pizza, whichever. So water-wise, all a little bit different, right? Depends upon what county you're in, what city, what you have access to. Some can tap right into the limestone water at their facility. Some counties don't allow that. Some have to use municipal water. Some cities or counties can't handle the amount of water that a distillery uses. So some distilleries have to actually like pay or change some of how like the county or city does what they do just to accommodate what they need. So it's all a little bit different. The biggest thing is your runoff, right? You use a reverse osmosis system or trying to figure out there's a lot of water that's used when your spent grains comes out. So that's what essentially when you go places and you get to like stick your finger in the little tub or look at what looks like oatmeal, right? Once we extract the alcohol off that, it goes in the barrel. What do we do with all that oatmeal?
I thought they just got fed to pigs or something. I don't know.
So historically, yes, but it is steaming hot, wet, 96-ish% water content. Not fun to truck. Nope, I'm not trucking warm milk anywhere, right? Just not doing it. It's also doesn't have shelf stability. So you've got a couple days if you're lucky before it starts getting weird and probably not great. So a lot of distilleries had partnerships with farmers, right? Boone County. We had a farmer up the road. He would come get it, take it in his little truck, take it and feed his hogs and cattle. And then sometimes we'd get like really good cuts of beef in our freezer. Perfect trade, right? But we laid a barrel a week at that time. So small quantities. So somewhere like a Heaven Hill, a Bardstown Bourbon Company, a large company that may have 16, 17, 18 tanker trucks of spent grains that leave a day.
A day?
Yeah. Where's that go?
Yeah. Where does it go?
Where does it go? Right. Also, a lot of places have thought about using dry houses. The energy that's consumed in a house to dry that spent grains and make it where it's shelf stable. It can be transported later. It can be exported and sold, right? For like, I work with the United States Grains Council. So they do a lot of research in aquaculture, feeding dried spent grains, DDGs, to shrimp, to tilapia. Like, that's a really cool concept.
The bottom feeders.
Yeah. How do I get it to you in these other countries that do this aquaculture, right? If I'm not using a dry house, which is a super energy consuming beast.
Right. It's like you're doing something to be sustainable or to reuse things, but then in the same time, to do that thing, to dry it, you have to use a ton of energy.
And I also think my age group, and maybe I'm different than this, but like if my family had a farm and my grandpa had it and my dad had it, dad's done. A lot of people my age are going, let's just sell it. It's worth a lot. I don't want to do all this. Whereas like I might be the one that's like, oh my God, let me do it. Right? That's not happening anymore. So these farmers that used to have tons of cattle, they're passing away or they're passing it on to their children and their children don't want to do it anymore, right? That legacy of farming isn't there. So we're running out of places that spent grains can go. So for the last 3 years of what I've been doing at the KDA, we put some money and some research into like, what are our options? Think outside the box, right? I held a reverse pitch competition where I was like, anyone who has an idea, tell me. Let's go. You want to make it into perfume? You want to make it into granola bars, Cheetos? Like, let's go. 100%. And so we got all these really great ideas, but to make them to scale for a state that has so much is insane, right? Or the capital, where is it going to go on the land? You know, you go to Scotland, they don't have that problem because they have biodigesters everywhere. Here, nobody wants that smell.
What is the biodigester?
So anaerobic biodigestion is essentially kind of like a giant septic tank, right?
Okay.
You got a big tank, you pump things through, you got to keep your bugs happy in the tank, right? So they eat different things. And then you can use, depending upon how you end product it out, depends. I mean, food waste can be put in it. A lot of, upcycling is a big thing now. The end product that you get can be used for fertilizer. It can be carbon can come out of it. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things. A lot of times it's some of the gas that can then be put back into the grid for power. There's a poultry farm in Kentucky that does that, right? So they power back up the grid with what they've got waste-wise on a gigantic poultry farm. So figuring out how that works. I mean, I went to Scotland last May. You go to a distillery, you can see off past their property a little bit, gigantic vats that are biodigesters. The wind changes, you can smell it like a little bit, but not a whole lot. But they don't have to worry about that problem. They rely on themselves to do it. And then there's other like avenues that get to use that biodigester, right? So you keep those bugs happy. They do what they're supposed to, decomposing and making it into a secondary product, whatever that is you choose. A lot of places it's fertilizer, a lot of places it's topsoil. But figuring out how that translates here, because a lot of people, you say that and they're like, ew, I don't want that. Why would you want that somewhere? I'm like, okay, well, where do you want me to go with it? I can't land apply it. It can't be dumped. Like, those are all things that are horrible, you know? So figuring out, it may not be a one size fits all, but maybe there's someone somewhere that comes up with an idea, right? Can it be dried? Can it be upcycled and used as a protein on different foods or places that don't get access to enough food, right? Can I make a supplement that gives them protein? Can I make it into a cracker? Can I, there's got to be something, that'd be cool. Right?
Yeah.
Or the complete side of my brain that goes to like, it's such a fibrous content. Why can't it be put into cardboard from a paper plant? So then you have a whole sustainable package. You've got your recycled glass, you've got your bourbon. What that spent grains made that bourbon then goes into your cardboard for your packaging, the back set of your label, right? We think about recycling, like, wouldn't that be huge as a consumer to know that like every part of what made your bourbon is back in the packaging instead of another product to be wasted?
Is it heading that way? Because that sounds amazing. That sounds like a very good story too.
I'm just not that smart. I don't know how that works. But it has to happen, right? Somebody has to do it. There's got to be someone.
So where does it go? Out of all the things that you see and you're focused on, be it water, corn, trees, what do we call this? The used grains.
Spent grains?
Spent grains.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real hard one to remember. What's the biggest challenge?
Spent grains.
Spent grains. I was about to say, as you're saying all this, I'm like, it sounds like you've got the tree thing kind of figured out.
Yeah.
Sounds like water. It's not really a thing.
Be a good steward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Use less of it. Figure out how to tweak your machines to use a little bit less, and a little bit less every year makes it a little bit better. But spent grains, like, we're not slowing down in the production of what we're making. And you can't have it sit. If your spent grains don't move, your process stops. I'm here to tell you, none of them are stopping a process during the day. Well,
put it to the side.
And then also the bottles are going off the shelf or they're being exported. So it has to be a full circle operation. When one cog doesn't move, you can't keep. So we spend a lot of money in research. I have a database with UK that all KDA members can access of like, here is a spreadsheet of every solution. I mean, down to one use like silverware. Somebody was making like furniture out of it with brewer's grains overseas. I'm like, furniture? Like an IKEA? Like what is happening?
You just think about the composite board or whatever the IKEA furniture is made of.
MDF.
It's kind of like your cardboard
idea.
Can it
not be MDF? Like, what is MDF? Like, can it, right?
Recycled material? I don't know.
I know. So I don't have a chemistry or bio hootenanny degree, but my brain goes to like, it should for sure work. Someone can figure that. We can grow an ear on a mouse.
Yeah.
Please put my spent grains in something.
Right. Yeah, we can do so much amazing things. It's like somebody just needs to put their energy there. And it
Pun intended. That was nice.
I didn't even need to do that. That's just natural. It just flows.
Yeah.
Okay. There's so many different places to go. When you talk about, what did COVID do to the bourbon industry? Because when I think about, when you're just talking about things flying off the shelves and this and that, when I think about supply and demand, I felt it as a consumer, but being on the other side of it, like what did that feel? What did COVID feel like? I
mean, we are a hospitable group, right? We want you to share that experience, that cocktail, that dinner, that tasting menu, that visitor's experience. We want you to do that with someone in person. So COVID was such a weird thing for us as like an industry, right? There was still the demand. There were still the bottles going off the shelf. There were still the people that were enjoying that, but it was done so differently. So we kind of accommodated, right? We did the Zoom world. I led plenty of tastings with groups all across the United States because they missed having that interaction over Zoom. exporting slowed down a little, just like it did for everything else. I don't think anyone had a bourbon shortage. It was not like a toilet paper situation, but it made, I think, everyone kind of take a step back and look at their business model of, okay, heaven forbid something like that happen again. What does that look like for us? A lot of my craft guys hung on, but that's a hard thing for them. They're not global companies, they're a mom and pop that maybe own the place and have 2 or 3 employees. So how do you keep making things and putting it away in a safe way? And then also hope for the future that you're just doing it and you can't have visitors come see it, right? A lot of craft brands, you form a relationship with them because you went there. You heard the owner talk about it. You heard the dad and the son talk about how they started a farm and now they're doing this or that, right? That's the relationship, and that's the reason you choose it off the shelf. That became really hard during COVID because you couldn't go interact or see them.
Yeah.
So trying to pick up from that. And I get the same twofold question, right? Somebody goes, well, what about the bourbon boom?
Yeah, that was the kind of the impetus for my question is I feel like there was a boom during that time. I feel like more people were at home and drinking.
Yeah, which the responsibility had of my job would be maybe that's not a good plan. But then I'm sure the, finance part of these big companies was keep buying it, but do it responsibly, We
don't need to worry about spent grains. Put them on the side.
Yeah, just whatever. Keep going. Yeah. So I think there's a balance, right? It's a really odd place for our industry who wants you to not, we don't want you to become an alcoholic. We don't want you to become addicted to anything. We don't want you to always have to need it. We want it to be part of your culture and what you enjoy and what you share with people. And our biggest thing, as an industry, the KDA, anything we do, it is always enjoy bourbon, like a true Kentuckian, responsibly. It is not about quantity. It's about quality. It's about the journey and what it brings you to. I don't need you buying cases and cases and waiting in line and spending $1,000 on a bottle. At the end of the day, there's only so many recipes. So generally it's something else, you know what I mean? That you can get access to. So thinking about it from that perspective brings me to what my other side of my job is, right? That workforce development we talked about, finding people, right? We lose so many kids that go to school in Kentucky and then leave and go to the West Coast for a winery, for a brewery. I'm like, hey, do you know where you grew up? Do you know you could throw a pebble and probably get a job? But they don't look at it like that because it's not how they grew up unless their family has always worked in one, right? So I can't be like Ford, and I can't go to 5th graders and say, it'd be really cool for you to do as a job when you grow up and stay in the state of Kentucky. Work for Heaven Hill, work for Maker's Mark, work for Jim B. We can't market to kids. And by the time we can, and it's responsible to do and educate them, they've already made their career choice. Right. They've made their path. So figuring out how to educate them on you're really good with numbers and want to be an accountant. Do you know how many industries need those? Right? How do you get to stay here and learn about the heritage, the culture, things that you grew up with and you love, and also have a job that's pretty fun, right? It's a fun industry to work in. So we just signed papers a couple weeks ago. An announcement will go out at some point. But we have, as an industry, I've got some of my members that have sponsored money and made donations for a pilot program for responsibility programming across Kentucky schools. So this is higher ed. It's going to be college campuses. I think as of right now, we have 11 that have signed on. And having an industry, right, that sells alcohol, fund a pilot program to have apples to apples data for Kentucky schools so that when we go to legislators, it's not just UK's campus and their health, safety, and wellness. It's EKU, it's Murray, it's Transylvania, it's Bellarmine, all saying, this is what we do as a state because we care about you and we want to do this. And then twofold, the alcohol industry is paying for it because we believe that that's what it should be, right? Everyone should have a healthy relationship with it if you choose to. So that's a huge initiative that's happening. And so that's the other part of my brain, right? I handle that, but I also want to be a good steward of it. So
your brain must be very busy.
Yes. That's why I wear a lot of hats. It's fun though. Every day is different, right? I don't just do the same thing at my job. And then there's also the things that get thrown at me that I'm like, that's probably in a bucket of mine, right? We'll figure it out. Sure, there's regulation or, something going on.
Yeah. What's interesting that you said is now being older, I think the bourbon industry is super interesting, and like being involved in it or having a job in it, etc. And I wonder, you're just mentioning younger kids leaving, going other places, and I can see the allure for that because you're kind of born and raised here, and you think the grass is greener, and then you go to that place and you realize the grass isn't greener.
Yeah.
Kind of telling my own story here a little bit.
Yeah. Self-narrative.
Yeah, this is interesting. But then I think I don't know if it comes with maturity or if at a different point in life you understand what was kind of in your own backyard and how really interesting it is. I just don't know if people are thinking, like younger people are thinking about it like that, the same way of like, oh, I'm thinking about now. Yes, this is super interesting industry and I'd love to be in this industry.
Yeah.
At 37, probably at 18, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about like,
yeah, I mean, y'all have the Bourbon Trail. Like that's one of the highly sought after destinations for the world. You know what I mean? But I think a lot of people that grow up here are just like, some distillery. Like,
yeah,
just kind of like like I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. Like we got a beach. Whereas like here, everybody's like, you grew up there. Like, yeah, it's like totally, it's just like a side of a beach. It's totally fine. Normal. Yeah. It wasn't somewhere that I was like super stoked about because like for other people, that's a vacation spot. For me, it's just like back home, right? I eat at the same restaurants. I do the same things. I think figuring out how we can have pride in what we do and the next generation understand it to stay here is a hard thing, right? So I think a lot of the mindset was, well, I don't distill, so I wouldn't work at a distillery. And I'm like, think about the last time you went on a tour, how many people you interacted with and what all their jobs were. They don't go in the facility that distills at all, really ever, right? They have marketing, they have hospitality, they have events degrees, they have experience in accounting, in legal, in any type of finance. Like the amount of paperwork and logistics that happen in a distillery, like we would absolutely welcome someone that has some background in that. So just thinking outside of the box, I did it's called Bus to Business with the Kentucky Chamber. It was the first time the distilling industry was invited to do it. And it's usually like manufacturing and cars and e-batteries and whatever else, right? All the fun things and the nurses. And they were like, what if you did it? Have some people come on. It was via Zoom because it was during COVID and talk to some high school students. And I was like, oof, what brand's going to do that for me? Like I can do it because I don't have a corporate legal structure and I don't really have a brand that I can talk about. So I put the call out to some of our members. You mentioned New Riff earlier. I'm dear friends with most of the people there. It's a wonderful organization. They're a member of ours, and they're obviously up here by us. So one of, she's now, I'm going to butcher her title, Hannah Lowen. So she was VP, now I think CEO, CFO, whichever one of those. She said, I'll do it for you. I'll talk to him. I'll talk to him about what I do on a daily basis because it doesn't always have to be the alcohol, right? It's the paperwork, it's the logistics, it's the marketing, it's the growth of the company, building what you want to do, that plan. So she did. She came on, not a mention of a bourbon, of an alcohol, of anything that anyone under 21 should not talk about. And these kids were like so honed in on this and like, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So I was like, okay, what else can we kind of dip our toe into? Like, where else can we go where like I can tell them like this is an okay thing to think about if you don't think about the product itself or enjoying the product or having the product, right? It's still a business model. It's a really cool business model. It's not like a lot of other ones. We're really good at forecasting. Some businesses are not. That is our strong suit. We like to age it and wait. But yeah, trying to figure out how we responsibly sustain the industry in a workforce, in a tree, in a water, in a corn, in a farmer. I mean, any resource you can think of. So
I'm getting so educated here. It's just, but it's things that the normal.
No, because
like,
when you
I
go
don't think about.
Yeah, when you go in party source, you're like, what is new on the shelf? Or like, ooh, look at that label. Or, oh, what's this one? I've never heard of it. Or where did this come from?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking
now you'll think about like holistically, like, where did that glass?
I will.
Was that glass up to par? Like,
wonder where these spent grains went.
Yeah.
Are they still sitting there?
Yeah.
Speaking of party source, can we talk about what's going on with, and I don't know if you have a stance on this or not. I'm like, how do I ask this question? like the Pappies of the world and the things that are hard to come by,
The unicorns.
or like I even wonder what you think about the industry in regards to, or what's going on outside of the industry with consumers, right? Who go, and there's all kinds of Facebook groups. I'm in them all, and it's just like, oh, there's this on the shelf today, right? And then like people run, they go buy the thing, and for people like me, it's very frustrating because I just want to try the thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't need 5 bottles on the shelf.
Yeah.
But like even with the Travelers, which is like, it's a $35 bottle of bourbon. It's like,
You're afraid to open it because what if you can't get it?
correct. And I'm like, damn it, I was born and raised here. I should be able to try these things.
Yeah.
And even in Austin, same issue.
Mm-hmm.
All the same issues. People all of a sudden everywhere are like, oh, I love bourbon. And you're like, do you really? Or are you just like, you on this bandwagon? And people will go and buy everything off the shelf that's, again, I don't know if it's better than or less than things that are still on the shelf, but I just want to try them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, I don't have access to them, or I have to, have a raffle ticket for one and never be like, Megan bought me a bottle of Rip Van Winkle just because it was on the shelf and I'd never seen it on the shelf before.
Yeah.
Don't ask me how much was paid for that bottle of Old Rip Van Winkle. I'm not even talking about the 20-year or anything crazy like that. I'm just talking about like,
normal.
Right, which probably retails for, I don't know.
It should retail for maybe like $60.
I was going to say like $80. Yeah.
Not that price.
Not that price. But does the industry, or did you guys ever talk about that? Like what that's like from a consumer standpoint, how to try and fix that issue? Not that it's your issue to fix, but
Well, I mean, so I think about, all right, Boone County, I led the single barrel program when we started it and rolled it out. I had 10 to 12-year-old MGP juice, which doesn't exist in nature anymore, right? It was highly sought after. So we were really picky about the accounts and the places that got to come, choose a private selection barrel, bottle it, put their cool little hang tag or their name or whatever logo for whatever group. So it's a double-edged sword. It's awesome that people want to talk about your product and the price goes up and then it's harder to find and then a lot of people want it. But then also the people that, like you, just want to try it or are really loyal to the brand and we're hoping to find a bottle somewhere, or the bottle goes from a $79 retail to, if you can find it, flipped on the secondary market, it's $800.
Yeah.
Same juice.
That's about right.
Same juice. So I think a lot of it has to do with, right, a blogger, someone that someone idolizes that has reviewed it or said, oh my God, this is like the best thing. Or does it go back to the celebrities, right? Has someone been seen, right? Like I used to watch, what's the show? Axe Capital. What's it called? Billions. What bottle was always on every table? Like a Michter's 25. Ever seen a Michter's 25 in nature?
I haven't.
There's one in a glass case at Michter's that you can see, but like that was what people who may not know what is going on watch this show, right? They've watched this entire show and that's always what they see on the table of just like being casually poured at the office. And like casually poured at the office, 25-year-old Michter's. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So
isn't there a 12-year?
Yeah.
I don't even think I've seen that one in a while.
Yeah. And I mean, for brands, it's super frustrating because they can't just put stuff out on their shelves. Now they have to figure out how to limit it, how you scan your ID, how you're allotted a certain amount based on your ID certain times of the year. Or do they randomly on a Saturday when there's some people there that are there for a tour, do they quietly just put a couple bottles out and see if anyone notices? Yeah. And it doesn't cause a ruckus, right? Because there's lines when they open. There's people camped out in tents. Last time I went to Heaven Hill, there were people out in the parking lot, like sleeping. And I was like, what are you releasing today? Like, what is happening? I'm just here for a meeting. Like, what am I? And then I felt like, am I missing something?
Yeah. Do I need to stand in line?
And it's like human nature, right? A line forms, I'm standing in it. It's aligned to nothing. Like I didn't need it, but I'm doing it because that's what we do, right?
Yes.
So I think it's a cool thing. I think it's cool that like products that maybe didn't get that much traction, but then the other part of me is like, so at the end of the day, there's only so many recipes. A lot of it still tastes the same. Are we going to pay that much for it? Or do you need 12 bottles of some unique product to then sell later illegally on the secondary market, right? Just add that in there and then jack up the price for what? To never open it and stare at it. I mean, I have signed bottles on my bar, and when friends come over, they're like, oh my God, that's really cool. And I'll crack it open, and part of them just like cringes. And I'm like, it is meant to be enjoyed. So if you enjoy it and get to taste it, that bottle's still signed when it's empty. Like, I don't covet, I don't keep like.
I need to come to your house then.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
usually when Greg's over, he's like, what do we got new up here? What's happening?
I feel the opposite about some of those. So much so where and I was just complaining about the hoarding. And I have, like, I'm complaining about myself, but I
Sure.
will say the thing that I'm hoarding isn't a gem.
It's not a huge unicorn. It's just
Buffalo Trace.
you feel like you're missing out if you don't get it. Yeah.
It's my favorite go-to.
Sure.
$20 to $30. I don't know what it is. $26
probably.
maybe. But they're limiting on the shelves. You can only buy 2 at a time. So anytime I'm in there, again, it's because I drink it.
You see it and you're like, oh, I gotta have some.
Right. And I'm like, why do I feel this way about? And no dig at Buffalo Trace. Again, they're my favorite. But like to have that feeling of when I go into the liquor store, like needing to have that thing or needing to spend the money that I don't need to spend, like it's definitely like frustrating as a consumer. And this isn't, again, not your problem to solve. Just like, man,
I don't know who solves it.
I don't know either. And then it's gamified too, right? So the liquor store that I go to, you have to spend so much money.
You get your points.
And then there's the, I know who does the point system, but this other one, they just have to know you. They have to see you in the store. When we moved back, I was trying to find like the local honey hole.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, well,
Did you drive out of state for that?
No, it's right up the street here. I don't want to mention it. It's right up the street. But anyway, I go in and, they have a great selection. I'm just like, hey, like, do you have this, this, and this? Or what do I need to do to be able to find this? It's like, oh, I just need to see your face in here more. Like, shit. Okay, well.
Every day on the way to work out, I'm going to the liquor store just to take a look.
Almost every other day I was in there. And I would then I'd be in there and then I'd see something else and I'd end up buying it. I have no business being in here. I've got so much liquor. It could probably last another 5 years.
Yep.
But, and then there's that and all the ways it's gamified now. And it's kind of exhausting. I'll be honest, as a consumer. It's like, I just want it. I just want the thing and I want to try it. I live in Kentucky. I feel like I have a damn right to try it.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my grievance. And
you need to get you a friend that has a really good collection. That's what you need to get.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at one right now. But I'm curious though, and you kind of answered it. But if the distilleries and they understand that, I don't say consumer frustration because I think maybe this is just my own isolated issue. But I do.
You're not the only one. I mean,
I don't want to generalize, but yes.
I mean, even so, from a KDA perspective, I can't tell you at our enjoy@kybourbon.com email address how many emails we get about, do you know I can't find this, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I would like you to understand what we do.
Right.
It's not that.
Yeah. I know there's bourbon in my email address.
Or I'm like, and that's not a member. Or also not my problem. But it's everyone, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone has that frustration. Or you've drank something that is now a unicorn and you've drank that your entire life and that's what you enjoy. That's your go-to or whatever. And now it went from the Henry McKenna, right? That's a 10-year, it used to be $37.
Oh, yeah. That's also a green label.
Now it's
right?
Yeah. Now it's where does one find that in nature?
You know, I just got some of that.
Did you?
Megan did at Costco.
Not for $37.
No, I think it was 60 something.
Oh, that's pretty good though.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's somebody wrote up a review and was best bourbon of the world. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Now you can't find it.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because I haven't opened it.
Yeah.
Because I know that it's a unicorn.
Because you're going to wait. And we are now in this cycle.
Yes. I will open something if I find a second bottle of it. So when I bought the Travelers, again.
Jordan, you got to get over that.
Travelers, I haven't tried it. I can't even give you my opinion on it. But I have 2 bottles of it now. I know what you're going to say. You're just going to say, and I don't want to dog on them, but you're going to say it's going to be a letdown because I'm building it up in my mind that it's some special thing because it's coming from Buffalo Trace. When in reality, it's it's probably decent, but it's not the holy grail of what I'm making it. I understand that, but I still.
It's good for whoever wants it to be good, right? I'm not to judge. Some people like stuff and I'm like, woof.
Yeah.
I don't like that. But also, I don't want to be crude, but it all pees out the same.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
So.
No, it's
whether it's an $800 bottle that you feel really bad about or the $70 bottle that you were like, what a steal, or bottom shelf. At the end of the day, if you had enjoyment from it and don't have any regret and you got to share it with someone,
mm-hmm.
that's what's important.
There's usually always regret involved.
Yeah, well.
But I will say that I have started to crack some things open, but I will want to do it with people who I know also have an appreciation. Again, not that we can all
it in Coke.
Right. We can't all, I won't pretend to.
Not your sister. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Does she drink? I'm trying to even think of her the last time I drank with her.
She drank something with ginger ale. I don't think it's Makers. What is she? Four Roses and ginger ale? Something.
Okay.
Something, yeah.
A blend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A single
In a big-
barrel.
in a plastic. Yeah, I know. Anytime she wants to try a single barrel, I'm like, by itself? What are we doing with that?
Yeah.
Oh. But again, she enjoys it. So
Yeah.
however she enjoys it.
Yeah. Well, I started doing a thing where this is big sidestep here. I would get, when each of the kids were born, I went and got a nice bottle of something that was hard to find. Like, I don't know how I put a marker, like a wine marker or whatever, wrote their name and, their birth date on it. I'm going to open that with them when they get married. At least that's the intent. But some of these, I'm like, man, I want to open them right now, but I haven't been able to find them again.
Yeah.
But again, if you're enjoying it with somebody that, like, I would open something with you or with Greg or Brittany or my dad or people that I know appreciate it versus just somebody who's like, oh, that's rare, I want to try it.
Or they pull out a shot glass and they're like, can I try something? I'm like, not in that vessel. Not in this house. Where'd you find that? But also doing that, I think I sourced some Derby bottles because I think Greg did Derby bottles for when Ev and Gabe were born. I feel like that was his shtick. We had to track something down. But like, that is now a special thing for you when your son gets married years from now.
Yeah.
Please let it be years from now.
Lots of time.
Years from now. That is a moment that you can tell him about that product, right? That you've also maybe never had. You share that together, and then that bottle loses the like, oh my gosh, what if I don't open it? What if I never find it again? Because it then becomes his that he tells the story of, right?
Yeah.
So that also part of that heritage is exactly what it's about.
Yeah. That part's going to be cool.
Yeah. And you have a few kids, so
it's
you
a,
got
like
cool four cool bottles.
Yeah. It's like the looking at every day, and I'm like, I can't do anything with
You
this
need
one
to
yet.
track
And like,
those.
look,
You
turn
need
it
to pack
around. I'm
those
like, oh,
somewhere. Yeah.
I wrote on this one. This is somebody's.
Yeah.
So, last question. What is something, like, what can consumers do when we think about the environment sustainability? Is there anything that consumers can do other than being aware, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I've become more aware in this conversation, what goes in, what goes out. But is there something that I can do as an everyday consumer to, I don't want to say help alleviate, but is it just being aware? What is the thing?
Before you said that, I think education, right? And ask the questions, right? You buy a product off a shelf, you see a cool little, maybe it's like a little green leaf that's like on the back by the barcode. Like, scan that, look that up, figure out what that is. Look at, some brands' 2030 or 2035 goals. I mentioned earlier, like when we went to Scotland, I was blown away. They don't talk about it like Glenfiddich does this and this brand does this and Jameson in Ireland does this. Like, Scotch whiskey talks about their sustainability goals as Scotch whiskey, period, end of story, as a whole collective. So like, my dream would be we educate our, consumers enough. We educate our members, our companies to say Kentucky bourbon does X, Y, and Z, period, across the board. Not one is really good at this. One is really great at that. Somebody's pulling up the rear on this one. Like, as a whole industry, we can say it. So I think just educating, I think asking the questions, right? You see something on a bottle, email that company. They would love to hear from you to explain exactly what they're doing, because then that has made it full circle for them, right? You saw that this glass was recycled, or you saw that now there's this event that you can go help plant a tree. Do it. 100%.
I did see the Angels Envy one.
They do like a toast to the trees. Brown-Forman has the White Oak Initiative, which is funded by Dendry Fund, part of Brown-Forman. They do crazy cool research. They do different projects. I mean, there's something you can get involved in that makes an impact and then like teaches you along the way.
Yeah. I love it's very, and I know the intention of all those things is obviously very good. I also, from a marketer standpoint, it's like, that's really good marketing. Because I think about Tom's the 1-for-1 or the Warby Parker's, like, buy a pair, give a pair.
Yeah.
And it makes it much,
do that?
it makes it much easier for me to spend my money if I know that it's going a little bit further. It's like, oh, not only am I getting this thing, but I'm also like doing this thing. Makes me feel better about it.
And you don't really have to do much other than buy it. They're doing it for you, which, as lazy Americans, makes it a little bit better.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we didn't cover? Any gem that you'd like the audience to know? No?
I don't think so. We can do a part 2 about something else weird.
Yeah, we could just like totally not talk bourbon next time. But honestly, this was very informative because, again, no idea on this end other than just being a consumer and drinking alcohol and knowing that you're in the industry and you have access to really cool alcohol. Outside of that, spent grains. That's what, like, that was the big takeaway. So
start testing it in some labs for me, figure out how to solve that, right?
Yeah, I'll start noodling. And if anybody out there hears this and has an idea.
That's right. Sarah at kybourbon.com. Thank you. There you go.
Awesome.
I'll listen to it. I'll listen to the idea.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate you coming on.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
No problem.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Turn This Off. We love people, and we love talking to people to hear their stories, the journeys, the struggles, and the triumphs. From athletes to artists, from scientists to CEOs, anyone who brings something unique to the table. Who knows? Maybe you'll be our next guest. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you got something from it. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Turn This Off Podcast. And by the way, thanks for not turning it off. See you next time on Turn This Off.